one of the things that I've always learned to do now is usually everything in life, if the majority of the masses are doing it, it is the exact opposite of what they think. And let me give you an example, or what they taught or what they believe. Is we're always told that okay, so if somebody wants to do something, right? Let's say that they had an imagination. The very first thing that they go into is trying to figure out how to make that imagination happen. And here's what happens: you never figure it out. You never figure it out because you're leaning on different words. You're leaning on, I need to know how, I need to understand, I want to know why. See, there's all these things that, and for like even my youngest son, Kyle, when you talk to somebody and you become who you hang around, garbage in, garbage out, and then all of a sudden you feel this hopelessness and you don't know what you're going to do next. The voices that you're listening to and the people that you're listening to, their opinions and their thoughts, is their reality. Me and Terry were talking about this, and I just said, man, I remember the first time that I heard someone say that, you know, that you create your own reality. That what if everything that you are doing, I know that more now than any time in my life. And as I am now very aware that people have difficulty communicating their vision, their imagination, and ideas because they're choosing words that other people have different definitions to. I'm getting chills as I'm telling you guys this. So, how do you portray who you are, your imagination, how to turn that into reality? How do you do that if I could say one word and your definition to that word is different than mine? So you could say one thing like we've talked about in the past where it's not only a buzzword, but sometimes the word is extremely offensive to a group of people and they don't even know why it's offensive to them because they surrounded themselves with a group of people where they put different meanings and definitions to a word that makes it more offensive to people than other people. That you can actually live in a world where someone would rather shoot and kill you for a word that you used because of their definition of it. And the first word that comes to my mind is respect. You dissed me, man. You dissed me. I'm going to pop a cap in your ass. And it's like, I don't even I don't even I don't even know what I said. And so this whole thing for me being 62 and looking at people and having very heartfelt words to say to them, and they'd go, "You hurt my feelings." How? Well, I can just hear in your words that you're disappointed in me. And I don't pick up things as fast as other people. And so I just feel like you're hurting my feelings because you're basically saying I'm not doing anything when I know in my heart I'm doing everything. So now when someone says to you, I can't tell you how hard I'm working, they believe it in everything in their soul. And they just don't realize that they're not connected. And on top of not being connected, they're actually saying things out of their mouth that are not even words that they would use because someone told them to put it on a fucking script. And these are the words you're supposed to say. And so, Craig and Matt, when we talk about, you can have an actor that's really good say a line and everyone gets choked up and have another actor come out and say this exactly next same line, no feeling, no nothing, nothing clicks, nothing clicks.
Yeah, it's like the intention behind it, right? Is so
Yeah,
huge. Yeah.
yeah.
No,
And
I
again,
people don't really think of their intentions behind their actions. You're right. Like
no,
and if you did take the time to think about that, it's I mean, it's one of those concepts that definitely helps you connect with others, when you say.
yeah.
Well, it's all
Well, here's
about
the other thing.
understanding too. I mean, when you think about it, because it's what you said, Robert, in the beginning. if you don't understand where they're coming from or the type of the words that they were taught versus the words that you were taught, and again, it's culture, it's language,
Yes.
it's
Yes.
upbringing. I mean, okay, here's a funny little story. When I went to Britain back in whenever, uh, somebody said, "Hey, man, you want to drag on a fag?" And I went, "What? What are you doing? No, no, no. Do you want a cigarette?" What? And he goes, "Oh, yeah, here we call fags cigarettes." And it's like, oh my God,
Why?
talk about change. Yeah, exactly. Talk about
Yeah.
cultural difference. I mean, even though they speak the same language, but it's like, what we here in the US have been indoctrinated to the word fag, totally different.
Yeah, it's interesting
And
because it's similar with slurs in other countries, right? Like
yes.
the
Yes.
"see you next Tuesday" word in the United
Oh,
States is
yes.
one that people don't use very often, and then in other countries like Australia, it's used readily and oftenly.
Like
So
like like the word bloody, you know what I mean? When you it is pretty interesting that probably the most connected word when you see cultures talking to their own culture, it's like they can use that word in every sentence.
The N word.
And or the C word. You know what I
Yes.
mean? Or yeah, it's just amazing that, bloody. You know what I mean? You see people get all passionate and it's like, "You bloody idiot." And it's like, that doesn't make any sense to me. Say that to a culture that's in that culture. And they're like, he couldn't they couldn't put more serious passion in a statement to you. I don't get it. Well, it's like the F word. Oh, oh, I get it. And then one of my wife's favorite video is that uh it's sort of like a guide, it's the monk guides, you know what I mean? And you guys have probably seen that video where he's going, um, the it's, I don't know what it is, but the 40 definitions of the word fuck. And so there's got this guy that's just, the beard and everything, and he's like coming out and he says, so there is a difference between holy fuck and fuck you.
The Seven Dirty Words by George Carlin, too.
that's
and,
funny.
and I never thought of that, Craig. Thanks for bringing that up because George Carlin knew that there was a group of people in the world that didn't want to hear these certain amount of words. And so he went out of his way to use the words as fast and quick as he could.
And what's interesting is if you listen to the routine, if anybody has not, it's the Seven Dirty Words by George Carlin. And yes, there are those words some of which have transitioned into modern society.
Yes.
I'm not going to say all seven of them, and there's more that he's come up with, but let's just say that if you think about from the word standpoint, okay, it's just a word, but it's the meaning behind it and how we interpret it. Because let's just say the F word, yes, it can mean something very bad to somebody. But
Right.
if you look at it in the other direction, it's a beautiful word. What does it mean? It means to connect with somebody on an intimate level and enjoy the physical sharing of intimacy with them.
Yeah,
So,
that's the funny thing about that word is it's like, I always joke saying, people that want to immigrate to the United States and come here, I can't imagine learning the English language that we speak here in the United States, how hard that is because there's so many words that we have or sentences that we have that have double meanings or triple
oh, yeah.
meanings or quadruple meanings based on context. So it's
Yeah.
like, it's not just the word itself, but it's also the context at which you use it, the moment at which you use it.
Right.
I
So
think things can be not offensive if used in the right context as far as profanity goes. Slurs, on the other hand, not really on the same
Yeah.
page with that one.
I was watching a podcast with Joe Rogan, and he was telling me, I've never heard of this woman. It's like when you're ready, and Matt, I was gonna say in the beginning conversation before we started recording, is Dune. You watching Dune in the time of the life that you watched it, I just think was the biggest red Tesla that has ever been created.
Oh yeah, of course.
Because in the thought that I'm going to be unique, I'm going to have an electric red car. Matt was the first person that I ever knew that bought one, and then all of a sudden I go out and visit him and spend some time with him and his beautiful wife Hannah, and it's like wait a minute, everyone's got a white or a red Tesla, and so Joe Rogan was saying that anytime that he hears people that want to be tied to their past story of being a victim or blaming or whatever they're doing, right? He said you got to go watch this TED Talk by this Unami Park. Am I saying that right? I put it in the visionary
Yeonmi. I think
park.
it looks like it's Yeonmi Park.
Okay.
Yeonmi Park.
Right.
Park.
And so listen to the quick story of this. You guys can go find it on TED Talk. So this girl and her sister escaped North Korea into China and ended up here in the United States. And so the things these two girls went through to get here is unimaginable. The things that they say that happened to them is not imaginable. And so she talks about living in North Korea, and she says, a lot of people don't understand that you guys use words that you take for granted that I never ever heard. And on top of never hearing them, I never knew the concept of them. Like, how do you know freedom if you don't know the word or you never heard a word like it in your language that had the same definition?
Ooh.
And it goes the opposite way of other people making different definitions out of a word like called respect and what they think that is. What if you never heard the word or even know the word? So she said that she just remembers from the time that she can remember that it was always put in a situation that they always were hungry. She never remembered a time of not being hungry. And she said, it's not a word, it's not a description, it's a feeling. And she said, what ended up happening to my father is he was arrested and thrown in prison because they said that he did illegal trading. So now your main source of income on the very little income that you have is no longer there. She said, me and my sister, and I think she was like 9 or 10, couldn't believe it. It makes me emotional talking about it. And her sister was only a couple of years older than her. And they just knew that the little that they ate, that no longer was going to be that abundance. Fuck. That because dad's doesn't have the money and he can't do the trading he needs to get the food for them, that main source was gone. So she said, I grew up my whole life constantly wondering where so-and-so went, where so-and-so went, where so-and-so went. And these are kids that I played with. And we all knew that they died from malnutrition. That's how all the kids died. That's how all my friends died. I'm like, listen to this. And she said, so one day, me and my sister was outside and it started to get dark. And she said, all we ever heard was we don't know anything outside of North Korea, including the word God. So the God and the emperor and the person that run everything, that's this guy that's on the wall of every resident and every business. So God and the guy that created their lives as it is was created by this guy. You guys don't have him as a God. That's what we had for a God. And she said, so all I remember is when it got really dark, she said, if you looked all the way around, there was just this big bright light that was in the air. And she said, I looked at my sister and she said, if we go to that light, I guarantee you there's food there. And what the lights were light pollution coming from the biggest city in China. But she didn't know anything about it. She just said, I believe if we walk toward the light, that we'll find food. Because that's the only thing that mattered to her and her sister. So they knew they were going to die because her father was arrested, and we need to just walk toward the light. Nico. So all the bad stuff that happened to them, you guys have heard the Underground Railroad and trafficking, human trafficking. She starts going through her story and how she ended up in the United States. And now she's free. And this is what free means to her. and this is what love means. She said, I didn't know what love was. No one ever said the word. We don't have a word like it. There's no explanation to it. And so all the words that we take for granted, she's like, let me give you my interpretation of this word.
And that was her imagination,
It
which
was.
turned into a reality, but she was being stifled because of where she was and the culture that she was within.
Yeah, she was going, I don't even know how I made decisions based on the limited information that I had.
It's survival. I mean, I would
It's
assume.
just, it was just her feelings is the opposite of hunger is going toward the light. And I don't care what I got to go through to get there. So all this awful stuff that her and her sister went through to finally get rescued and end up in the United States. She goes, as a little girl, I didn't know what was happening to me, why it was happening to me. I didn't understand how it happened. So she says, you know, now I look at it different than when it was happening to me. But she says these really awful things that everybody looks at me and goes, I can't understand how you made it through that. And she's like, it's part of the journey. It was, I was going someplace where I knew I'd feel better. It's like, so can you imagine getting beat and raped and, you know, sold into human trafficking and then just going, I guess this is what people go through when they really want to get the thing that they want the most. So she never stopped imagining. And then a group of people went inside the, you know, Underground Railroad where they have human trafficking and a bunch of people rescued her and they just picked United States as a place they would send her. So when she gets here and it's like, this is what, see, I told you.
Robert, you did a short that we shared with everybody, Imagination and Manifestation.
Yeah.
And this is exactly it. She imagined it and then
Never
she
stopped.
manifested it. And you talked about that, not just in this short, because it was from an Ask Me Anything.
Oh, wow.
And I just posted it recently. And yeah, when you think, you know, it's, and what you shared was, in a sense, one leading to the other, but they're both one and the same because
Always.
imagination and manifestation are
Always.
the same, but in a sense, imagination, it took the imagination of somebody to think about it. And
Right.
then it had to take the action for that person to manifest it.
What I love most about words right now is you can take the word manifestation and put it in AI and ask it to give you words that are similar to it, if not more modern. And it's mind boggling to me. I know some of the people that are way smarter than I already know this, right? But it is pretty hilarious how many words we have that mean just like the other words that are there. You know what I mean? So you put in a word like manifestation, give me words that are similar, and it comes up with imagination. And then you put imagination in and say, hey, give me some words that are like imagination, and it comes up with manifestation.
I think that stuff works exactly the same way that denominations of churches work, because I've
Yes.
talked to people, and it's like there's some people that have been wronged by religion or Christianity that the word faith for them is like even a trigger word, just
Yeah.
because
yes.
they've had that used as abuse against them, right?
Yeah.
So there's certain things like that where it's like, okay, if you've been in an upbringing that had a bad juju around meditation,
Yeah.
right?
You're right.
Or prayer, then when you meet a new group of people and they say, hey, we're gonna pray, you're going, that ain't happening.
That's
You know
not
what I
me.
mean? But if they say, hey, we're gonna manifest, this is a new word, this is
Right.
something new that you can get behind. And I think a lot of those words come from that place, like come from a place of
It
someone just
does.
being wronged by the old language enough to be
Yeah.
like, I don't want to keep doing this. So
Well, that's why you need to imaginate, because
mhm.
that word hasn't destroyed you yet.
It's new, hot off the presses is what you're saying.
so, so not only, it was funny because someone sent me, I think I sent it to you guys this morning. Someone actually writ a song called The Imaginator. And so I know this clip is coming out soon, but yesterday I used Jamie in our inner circle as an example of, he just said that he didn't know how to imagine. And so I helped him realize that this is a kid that used to play air drums, and then went to pots and pans to a right-handed drum set because he's a left-hander, to ending up playing one of his songs that he created the beats for in front of 1,400 live people in a band. And so here's a guy that was telling me, I don't know how to imagine. And so I went, you're an imaginator. You already have superpowers. Look what you did. And
People don't understand it.
you just seen him light up. It's like, wow, I do have superpowers.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? How many people played drums to a song that they created live in a band in front of 1,400 live people? And I just made him realize the small percentage that he already imaginated. And so what else do you want to step into, and what do you want to do? And so, Jamie, then while we're doing the inner circle, then Craig, being the incredible MC he is and co-visionary, goes, Robert, I need to break in here, and I need Jamie. And he called him out. He goes, Jamie, listen, you wrote a poem? Yeah. And Craig, being the leader he is, just reads out and goes, Jamie, I'm not reading it. I'm unmuting you. And he whips out this poem. Oh my God. And it was about us and his community and interconnectedness that he has within our inner circle, and soon to be imaginator. So it's like, wow. And sorry to change subjects. I hope you guys don't mind this weird place to do it, but I need Matt to sort of do what he feels he needs to do, to talk about the biggest red Tesla that he's seen yesterday, and just how
Oh,
Matt, so share, Matt, if you don't mind, because when you get so excited and passionate about the stuff that's happening for you right now in AI, I know that some people say I don't know how to imagine. I can't do it. I don't feel it. And I know you well enough because you're my son, and I love and appreciate you so much. I look at you as a gift every day. But people have to know that in the years that you've been my son, I've seen times when it was dark for you.
yeah. Well, I
So
think
who is the
it's
person
part of the
that
human
had,
experience.
yeah, who is the person that at one time had no imagination? And if he did, he was imagining stuff that was pretty freaking dark.
Hmm.
And where you are today, where it's like, oh my God, you're just like on a laser beam going towards where you're going.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just you come across different ways of thinking, and it's normally like your perspective shifting about what things are about. And it really just takes like a couple of people or a certain group of people or a certain thing to really like get you to think perspectively different. And in my case, it took a while for me to realize that my thoughts and the way that I think about things is unique for me, and that that's okay, and that it's not for me to shape my brain around others, but for me to understand the world for myself. Um, and wanting to be an artist and a creative, translating that into the art forms that I want to. And so anytime I see when you're talking about the big red Tesla, it's Dune Part 2, because like for me, I've always wanted to make films. Dune is one of my favorite books. One of my favorite current working filmmakers is Denis Villeneuve. He's done like Blade Runner, all these other ones, Arrival, Prisoners. I could go on and on. So many great films. And I had seen this man through his career of me growing up loving cinema, watch him continue to make films, but always going back to the place of I would love, my dream job is to make Dune. He would always say it. When I was a kid, I read Dune. That was where I wanted to be. And this is like the untranslatable book. Like it's one of those books with Lord of the Rings that everybody had tried multiple times to get off the ground, even to the point of getting it off the ground with David Lynch, and it didn't work out. So it was just a difficult idea to translate, and if you read the book, you know why. So to see somebody show up and translate it in such a beautiful and incredible way is not only just inspiring to me, but it's a reminder that there's really no complex idea that you can't connect with as long as you have someone there to translate it to the heart. Because what's so interesting about the book Dune is it's very psychological. Like I'd say it's a book about psychology. It's a book about religion. There's many other things that this book is about outside of the hero's journey that Paul goes through. But the movie has a heartbeat, and that heartbeat is the relationships of the characters and Paul and all of these characters that are there, right? And that kind of exists in Frank Herbert's book, but it really exists in Denis Villeneuve's movies.
Wow.
And you know why. And that was the exact same translation, I would say. Not that the Lord of the Rings books aren't masterpieces, they're amazing. But the films that Peter Jackson did translated the heart aspect of Lord of the Rings so well that it connected with more people than the books did. Right?
Got it.
Because there's a whole group of people there that the barrier was fantasy, and they're like, elves? What? Are you kidding me? Like dwarves, elves? I'm not watching this. Goblins and stuff. But the connection was friendship, heart, perseverance, like very made human traits. And it's the same with Dune. So it's just a reminder to me as a creative that I can take these complex ideas that I have in my head and work my best and refine my craft at translating them into stories for everyone, to translate the way that I see the world and the concepts of psychology and the way that things work for me into a story that then can live well past me. Because I'm sitting there yesterday watching Frank Herbert's masterpiece being translated by one of my favorite filmmakers that loves and adores the work that Frank Herbert did. And the whole audience is loving it. It's nailing it everywhere. This is something that I thought was probably impossible from what I read. I wouldn't know how to do it. But it's a reminder, like I said, that you could take something very complex like religion, why we're here. And these are things that I have in my stories and can't get rid of, right? Like there's certain stories I've written that I knew I couldn't get off the ground just because of the points that they touch on without having those other aspects there. You have to have heart, you have to have character, you have to have understanding, and humans need to act the way they normally would, right? Which they do in Dune. So
this is evolution when you think about it, Matt, because how long has it taken you to get to this point where you can start thinking about that? Or in the case of Villeneuve, and how many
32
movie
years.
versions? Yeah. How many? Okay. Yes. 30. How many evolutions did Dune, the movie? And I'm not talking about the current version, but there were 2 or 3 other versions of the movie Dune to get it to this point, or The Hobbit. I mean, I remember I think it was Ralph Bakshi came out with an animated version
Mhm.
of The Hobbit
Yeah, the
years
Beatles
ago.
even tried to adapt it at one point with them in it. Lord of
Yeah.
the Rings.
And so we're talking
So
about,
yeah.
they had the imagination, but they only had, and again, I'm going to throw it back to James Cameron and Avatar, since we're talking about movies. He had the imagination of creating this incredible world, but he didn't have the technology.
Yeah.
Once he got the technology, now obviously in the case of the other films, they had technology at the time, they felt they could do it and do it right. But what I love about Cameron is he waited,
Mhm.
because he had that image like what you're talking about. He had that image in his head, and the only way that he could fulfill that image, fulfill that reality, or that imagination, and turn it into a reality, well, a reality in the sense of putting it on screen in the way he wanted it, because obviously we can't see that avatar reality here live in person with us. Well, maybe at Disneyland there's an augmented reality at Disney World, but the idea of he took it and he put it together, he created it, he turned that imagination that he had into a reality that could be shared with all of us.
Yeah, I agree. Well, it's like also another reminder too that the stories and the ideas and the things that you have are timeless. And there's two or three works that I've been working on for a long time in my life that play around with these concepts, religion or why we're here, and all of these things that I've worked on, but been fully aware that these are 80, $100 million films if they're ever going to be made, right?
Mhm.
Similar to Dune, where you're like,
Right.
I grew up watching films and I like a mixture of two things. If you can, this is why I said I loved Barbie last year and stuff as well. But it's like, if you can say something while also entertaining me, you got fucking something good, because that skill
Yeah.
is like very rare, even in the filmmaking world, right? You can be entertaining. You can be Quentin Tarantino. You can be entertaining and you can have great movies, but those films where you like leave and it's like making you question your whole life or who you
Yeah.
are, or your own journey or whatever it may be, those are like those monumental works. And I asked GPT before I got on here, like, because I got back going, okay, I'm going to read Dune Messiah now because I hadn't read that yet, and continue with the story myself. But also, I just have such a connection to science fiction as well, and a lot of my stories play around with science fiction. So a reminder that, oh, okay, these high complex ideas can actually be translated in a way that makes sense to a majority of people. And seeing also that you can have an idea when you're a kid or when you're young, and that idea can eventually grow, like you said with James Cameron and Avatar, to where that technology exists. I
Yeah.
believe those are the story ideas that I have, the two ones that I've always wanted to make. I believe that those are those things for me, and
Yeah.
that the technology is growing every single day for me to make those, and it's only on me to grow my skill set to be capable of making them.
Right.
So that's where I live with them.
Well, what I
I don't think
love
I'm
about,
wise enough to make it yet.
yeah,
So,
again, there's a lot of these words out there that people use, and sometimes it's, I just realized from a couple of people that I find extremely wise, they're mentors that I got to hang around, is they would not only get you to question everything you think, everything, but it's even better when you sort of like, actually go into the thought pattern of researching it to find out exactly what it was. And we've talked about this on different podcasts. And so one of the things that I've always learned to do now is usually everything in life, if the majority of the masses are doing it, it is the exact opposite of what they think. And let me give you an example, or what they taught or what they believe. Is we're always told that, okay, so if somebody wants to do something, right? Let's say that they had an imagination. The very first thing that they go into is trying to figure out how to make that imagination happen. And here's what happens: you never figure it out. You never figure it out because you're leaning on different words. You're leaning on, I need to know how, I need to understand, I want to know why. See, there's all these things that, and for like even my youngest son, Kyle. When you talk to somebody and you become who you hang around, garbage in, garbage out, and then all of a sudden you feel this hopelessness and you don't know what you're going to do next. The voices that you're listening to and the people that you're listening to, their opinions and their thoughts, is their reality. And it became your reality because you fucking bit into it. All right. So here's what people do that create magic in the world is they imagine it first and emotionally get into that imagination. Step 2, they shout it from the rooftops. Anybody that will frickin' listen, you know what? This is the film I'm going to do. You know what? This is what I'm going to do. And then guess what? Now you figure it out. See, so being patient, what a limited wisdom is to me, is okay, whatever that universe is or whatever. I had acquired the skills to help people imagine. And when they told me what they imagined, I'd share with them a plan to make that happen. Now we live in a day and age where there's numerous ways to implement that plan, right? Back in the day, there wasn't too many options. So if you said to the masses, do you want to make extra money? Yeah, get a part-time job. It's an option.
Mhm.
Because the thought of being an entrepreneur, which I didn't understand, and the thoughts that I listened to of other people with lack of imagination is it's very, very simple. You need money to make money. You need to be an intelligent, a professional, and you got to know somebody, man. You got to know somebody. So when you grow up and then you find a couple of mentors that go, Robert, that's total bullshit. What do you mean? Listen, if you create something of value for a group of people that's worth more than the credit or money in their hands, they'll give it to you. So when people see some of these massive nonprofits, I was thinking, wouldn't it be wild for some of you that are into this, looking at facts, try to figure out what Danny Thomas did with his imagination of one day I'm going to create hospitals where when children get sick, they don't have to worry about anything. They don't have to worry about transportation. Their parents don't have to worry about money, housing, or food. You got to let us know about your sick child, and we got your back. We got it. And if you looked right now, how big St. Jude's Children's Hospital is, and I just seen a fact just recently that when Danny Thomas started the first children's hospital, there was a 8 out of 10 chance you're going to die. Now that's 1 in 10. That's imagination, man. That is huge imagination. And if you looked how much money was given to that charity, it would rival any major corporation that's doing it for profit. They said that St. Jude Children's Hospitals has the best doctors in every area. You know why? They pay more than everybody else. Our goal is saving children. Our goal is to do whatever we need to do to make sure that they're saved. You're not under restrictions of whether or not. So the best doctors in the world go, if I can get employed by St. Jude Children's Hospital and I have an idea to prevent, cure, stop whatever these kids have, these guys will write a check and allow me to pull it off. That into the structured world is like, come on. So if you really hear about people that have that kind of, this is what I'm going to imagine. So you got a guy like Bill Austin, multi-billionaire. He gets a job going door to door selling hearing aids. He decides to start his own company. He becomes the number one company in the world. But in the process of doing this, he wants to make sure that children that can hear the words "I love you" or never have heard anyone ever laugh or hear a story through imagination. I'm going to go throughout the entire world, find children that don't know how to hear, and I'm going to give them free hearing aids. So now you got the Starkey Hearing Foundation. And when you see the biggest people on the planet are proud to be a part of the Starkey Hearing Foundation, including me, because these people have such an imagination of doing something that just seems impossible or endless. So yeah, I know there's a lot of ugly stuff going on in the world, but I love what St. Jude's is doing, and I love what Starkey Hearing Foundation's doing. So I just thought I'd throw that in the imagination, because a lot of times we have a tendency of talking about using your imagination to maybe create profits or bring in a bunch of cash that you eventually can give to somebody. I never thought to go to Chat GPT and say, what's the 10 largest nonprofit organizations? Or who is the top nonprofits that have given the most money? And when you look that up and you go, oh my God, I didn't know. Because the majority of people said, A, I want to make money, provide for my family. 2, I think I could do the same thing if this other company's doing maybe better. Then they build a large company and make more money and go public. And it's like, now money is just not even an idea for them. And then they don't feel fulfilled. So now they got to use this imagination to try to find joy in their life and try to figure out, how to. So, Bill Austin talks about all the miraculous things that have happened in his life. And they all happened after he had given a bunch of children the ability to hear. And he's watching a mom and a dad stand there, and they look at their child and go, I love you. And the kid's face changes, and immediately he starts crying. What makes you cry when you're watching somebody else cry? It touches that imagination and soul that every one of us know we have. It just, our little touches. We get these little touches, or like Matt said, whatever the amount of time that a movie like that could suspend your belief, that you actually get encapsulated with it and you're there, and it's just constantly playing on your emotions, and it makes you feel alive. It makes
you want to,
Yeah.
so true. You want to do things with your life to a certain extent that drag you into presentness, like as often as possible.
Amen.
And
And
if
yet we
that's
have
a
people who want
scenario
to
or a
keep us,
situation.
and yet we have people who want to keep us down and stifle that imagination. And they
Right.
don't want to move on to the next level. That's the thing that I hear you saying right now, Robert. And that's how, when I see you with people on stage, when you help them open up their minds more and expand to say, oh, I'm stuck. I don't know where I'm going. This and that and the other. And then you just go ahead and, okay, hold on just a minute. Let's, think outside the box. Exactly. Let's get plugged in and see where it is. And you have been able to witness this. If anybody ever gets a chance to witness Robert one-on-one with somebody that he's pulled out from the audience on stage and open up their imagination and turn that imagination into something that is tangible that they can reach for, oh my God. And that's the beauty of, that's evolution, actually, when you think about it, because all we are doing is we are imagining. How many of us that are of our age, maybe Matt, I don't know if you remember the Jetsons. It's like when that TV show came out. Yep, exactly. When that TV show came out, it was like, oh my God, that's what the future is going to be like. Flying cars, learning from home, robots that are helping us do the daily tasks. And that was in the 60s, the 1960s. And
Craig,
we
I
are on the
now
way to seeing that.
Craig, you now made me understand why I didn't really have what I would feel a lot going for me before the age of 26, because I didn't watch the Jetsons. I watched the Flintstones. So I was like,
But wait a minute. There was an episode of the Flintstones meeting the Jetsons.
And the only Flintstones I've watched, I was gonna say, is
I'm
the
gonna make
movie
the car
with
move with my feet.
John Goodman.
There you go. But it's interesting to look back. Okay, another one is Star Trek. Is that imagination of communication? Granted, we haven't gone to the transporters yet, and I'm sure there's work, they're working on it, but the fact that we've got space travel, that we are in the process now, we've got a space station up in the air. We communicate, maybe not necessarily yet, well, sort of, using a headset maybe, or with something that's plugged into our ear, we can communicate with people all over our known universe. Who knows how others communicate
that
with each other?
imagination. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I just thought of something, Craig, a download while you were talking. Man, talk about imagination. Whether you hate this guy or not, Walt Disney, man.
Oh, absolutely.
Hey,
Absolutely.
I'm gonna build a theme park. It's like where, when people walk in and they see, hey, I'm gonna transport them to whatever, you know what I mean? So people walk in there and the atmosphere, from the employees to the characters, his whole goal was to transport you when you step in there, that now you're in my world.
That is imagination to reality.
Yeah.
In 1955, when he first created it, and it continues today.
Yeah.
It will continue tomorrow. And it was interesting. You bring that up, Robert, because, okay, 1955, they had obviously Adventureland, Frontierland, Fantasyland, Tomorrowland.
We've talked
Well,
about this on other webcasts. Yeah.
yeah, Tomorrowland is practically today.
Today.
You
I
know,
never really thought of this, because
funny,
Walt
yeah.
Disney did not imagine that he could make waiting in line okay.
and yet he had the imagination to help people, at least, or people after Disney, help people, for lack of a better way of saying it, enjoy the wait in the line now. Because if you go into some of the newer attractions at Disneyland, there's an experience before you get to the ride. There's videos, there's things to look at. One of the best ones, in my opinion, at least up until recently, of course, was the Indiana Jones ride, because there were things on the wall. You got a little, what is it? A little code card, and there were hieroglyphics on the walls, and there was like a rope on a rock, and if you pull it, you'll hear a voice saying, "Hey, stop that!" Nobody would have ever done that. It's there's constant imagination in creating. And then I just did the Runaway Train recently at Disneyland, Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Train. I would never have thought of how they did it with magnetic levitation and movements. And all of a sudden you're doing things like, oh my gosh, wait a minute, what just happened? It's
Wow.
that imagination that started with Disney, whose concept still is active today in helping Disney move ahead to the future. And then what technology brings to it, the imagination of that. Whoever thought that putting the North Pole of a magnet to the South Pole of a magnet and it would move
Yeah.
because of that, or hitting the two together and then just dragging one over the other.
Well, we brought this up in other parts of our podcast. Is when the smartest minds in the world say that imagination is more important than knowledge, and the reason that I believe that is because we're seeing things that are happening right before our eyes each and every day. That was somebody's imagination, and I thought, as soon as I made the joke about, Walt Disney couldn't foresee people waiting in line, then my mind, when I'm connected, that I want to be connected, immediately thought, okay, very, very soon, everybody that's waiting in line will be having an experience waiting in line because they would be wearing, you know,
VR
I
headsets
gotta
or
use the
something.
right word, Matt. What is it called? A mobile computer?
Spatial computing.
Spatial computing. And so you would be entertained and you would be doing everything that you need to be doing while you're in line.
Mhm.
I mean, maybe the spatial computing is so good that going to those rides isn't thrilling enough anymore, you know?
Or it's caused them to say, okay, we need to imagine better. And this is where evolution is.
Yeah.
Because, okay,
Yeah.
here's where we are now.
How can
What
we
do we
get
do
their
now?
money?
Because what's
we
so
get their money?
Well,
interesting
that, yes.
is
Oh, well,
going,
there we go. There's your motivation.
yeah, is you go to some of those rides, right? And I'm fascinated with them. And you're fascinated with them. And you watch the younger kids, they're not as fascinated with these rides as me and you are. The
Mhm.
reason that they're not as fascinated is they grew up in a world where this ain't all that and a bag of chips anymore, right? And to think
Wow.
like the younger generation will have that as well, and how that changes the dynamics of the way that you perceive things. And
Right.
it does force people to step their game up. But here's the great thing. Those kids grow up and imagine the next step of whatever that is based off of what they believe that is, right?
There's the
And
evolution right there.
yeah. And so like
Oh,
I think as you have like different people like Walt Disney or like there's all these moments in time that there's this shift, and there's always got to be a person or persons behind that shift happening. And for Walt Disney, it was like he was going around telling everybody that he believed that animation could be just as big in film as shooting movies and all these other things. Before him introducing animated feature films into the world in the way
right.
that he did, it was like cartoons based off of serials that were based off of whatever, right? It was
Mhm.
normally to sell stuff, right? Like Ovaltine type stuff. And there was cartoons and things that existed, but not really like a feature length structure cartoon movie in the way that he was thinking about it. And him doing Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs was something like that no one really had done at that time, like got a bunch of people together and made a film. And then you fast forward that moment in time to the 1990s, and it was Steve Jobs and John Lasseter with Pixar doing the exact same thing. And there was a whole group of animators that did not do 3D animation, were against 3D animation, that saw it and said, this is computer animated. This is unnatural animation. This isn't. And you had a whole group of people that grew up with Disney, maybe like me or other older than me, through Disney's times that went, my version of this is I grew up already on this. This isn't new to me. This is
Mhm.
something that has existed as long as I have, longer. And they grow up and see it and go, I want something brand new, and invent 3D animation. Now we're going through one of those same situations again with artificial intelligence. And there's a whole group of people that are going, it needs to stay this way. And that's just not going to happen. There's going to be a whole group of people, just like John Lasseter and Steve Jobs and Walt Disney before, that go, here's the new way of doing it. And they're going to pull it in. And then there's going to be a whole group of people that are going to grow up doing that and seeing the
Right.
world through that lens. And like, I love the thought that we're going to see stories that we never saw before. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And because there's not that structure of it needs to be this or that, right? Like
Right.
we've seen some diversity in Disney in the last couple of years, but that diversity was something they had to fight for. Like as
Yeah.
great as Disney is, you go the further you go back, you face there's not a lot of princesses and princes and people that are of different ethnicities but white, right? And so you had to. And it's interesting and unfortunate, but the only reason the Disney even shifts to the place to make those things is because they're profitable for them. And so
Right.
you have to have these creators that have to tiptoe this line of being profitable and not offending everybody, but then also like adding their diversity and their ethnicity and their background to these stories, so they can connect with a whole group of kids that have never seen them before. So they can have their own princes and princesses and all these things, right? Their own stories to tell, like Moana
Mhm.
or the other stuff that they've created. And so I can't wait for there to be a whole situation where we're seeing animated stories and full feature-length films about things that we would have never seen before, from perspectives we would have never seen before, right? And I think that's really going to rattle people, because I think those stories are going to connect with people. And just like watching Hollywood learn the wrong mistake or the wrong things from the right choices constantly. Like I saw Mattel did Barbie, right? And it made all this money. And so then it's like, okay, now we need a Sour Patch Kids movie, right? And now we need a Hot Wheels movie. And how do we find auteurs to direct the Hot Wheels movie? Because we got Greta Gerwig to do Barbie, right? And it's like they totally did not get that it was the right creative at the right time with the right people that made Barbie. You're not going to just make consistent Barbies. That's not how the world works. You have to find someone that's passionate enough to take that on. So
what I hear to you saying, Matt, is like we always see that, someone will come out with a good vampire movie, right? And then all of a sudden, me and Craig were giggling about this. All of a sudden, in a blink of an eye, every show has to have vampires in it. It's like,
right.
So when you're doing it for money, and that's the only reason you're doing it for money, is because the group of people are attracted to that, like the Twilight and all of that stuff. They'll just flat take all the imagination out of it, because it's just, we get bombarded with it. So now people, I don't want to see another zombie movie. I don't want to see another vampire movie.
Well, that's why I think that it will be something like when people bring up, they go, well, if I can just entertain myself in the future by telling AI what I want and it makes it and I get to watch it, why would I ever watch anything else? And I brought this up before because I brought it up on the podcast with Corky and Joe and Michael, but it's like, you always will have that moment in time where you're bored of the things that you've fallen in love with and you want something new. And normally the thing that changes your mind is someone that gives you something you never thought of before.
You want to get into that. You want to get in that tractor beam. You want to click in and contact to your connection.
Like I finally watched Poor Things, Craig, and this won't surprise you. I loved it. I thought it was amazing.
Okay.
But I watched it, and me and Hannah got done watching it. We both liked it, and we looked at each other and we're like, AI ain't making that out of nowhere. Like that's a human invention for sure.
Oh, exactly. Well, but okay. Even though I didn't care for it, you have to admit, and this, okay, if we're going to continue to talk movies, the fact that somebody, first of all, took the time to write it, to create it, to put everything together for it, to
imagine it.
Yeah, to imagine it, to put it on screen and to make it available to the public. Obviously, there is an audience, and it took that imagination of saying, okay, Dr. Frankenstein, let's retell your story a little bit different and let's see what happens. Because in a sense, I think that's what it is this, Dr. Frankenstein type of story.
What's so interesting about that movie, Craig, is it's like I saw some review and it nailed it. But if you've seen Barbie, right, it's like Poor Things is a similar concept to Barbie, but for people with mental illness, because it's like that mix on it, right?
Yeah,
because it's like it's definitely the unhinged version of many different subjects. But it's so interesting. Did you finish it?
No, I did not.
Okay, so the movie's not really about Frankenstein. It's really about her, and it's really about like her going out into the world, similar to the way Barbie does in Barbie, into the real world, and realizing, holy shit, like I am more just an object of admiration than I am a person, right? And like that's a large part of something that women deal with, is like there's this scene in Barbie that I'll never forget where she finally gets to the real world and she realizes all these men's eyes are like on her in a very sexual way, like a desiring way.
Right.
And she's like uncomfortable about it. She's like, I don't know what the hell this feeling is, and how I can talk to my wife about it and go, yeah, that happens when you're 12 years old as a girl, sometimes even younger. And you have to deal with that growing up, that there are these men out there that just stare at you with sexual admiration, even as a child. You know what I mean? And that you grow up in that world of adult men perceiving you that way.
Right.
And that's where like
Yeah.
catcalling or some of these other things come from, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like,
Mhm.
and so to see that perspective and to have it out there, you know, I would say Poor Things just goes a different realm. Instead of looking at it and going internally, Bella Baxter in the movie, played by Emma Stone, just says fuck it and just like does the opposite, right? She like just destroys those guys instead. She's like such a stronger force than anyone else in the movie that
Mhm.
it's like yeah, I would say I loved Poor Things, but
Yeah.
that
Okay.
wasn't gonna not be the case. I didn't think, because I just love all of Yorgos Lanthimos' movies, like The
Hey,
Lobster and stuff. So
well, when people don't understand themselves and enough to be able to love others like themselves, then they're judgmental. So as
Oh, yeah.
whenever I hear people that are judgmental, it shows me their lack of imagination. Because when you look at something like so you say, what's the longest running TV show? You know what I mean? And people go, well, no one's even close to them. It's The Simpsons. They
That's right.
have 35 seasons. Okay, so what kind of creating imagination came behind that? And then, I thought Matt would get a kick out of this too, where, when all of a sudden overnight someone came up with the concept of video games. It's like,
yeah.
so now you're plugging into, okay, I'm going to take imagination in a whole different direction.
Well,
And
and watching that
I'm old
fucking
enough.
progress over my lifetime, right? Because it's now, you know, video games now are like multiple different genres in and of themselves. And I'm not just talking about like horror or comedy type genres. I'm talking about genres as in like there's some games that are all gameplay and no story, and there's some that are all story and not a lot of gameplay. There's different ways to interact with these stories. And
Oh,
that's one thing I
you mean
find,
like different groups?
yeah, that's what I find so fascinating about it, is that it's like
Hey, why
it's this
doesn't this
new
group,
medium.
why aren't these engineers, these introverted engineers, not interested in video games? I don't know. Let's come out with Sim.
Well,
Let's
it's
let them
interesting
Mhm.
because you end up
Yeah.
like there's always these waves that happen, right? Like the programmers and engineers, they're incredibly talented and creative people, but they're not talented and creative in the same way that the people that are chilling in the film world are,
Of
right?
course.
And so video games had to get to that point, and they're now hitting that point, right? And eventually will overtake film by a long shot. They've already done that financially, but overtake it as far as storytelling goes.
Yeah.
But
And the fact
that
that you could be immersed in it as more.
well, yeah, the
Yeah.
missing part that was missing for filmmaking, because it's such a interactive situation. I'll tell you the issue that I've always dealt with video games and storytelling. So there's this amazing show that came out called The Last of Us, and if for any of you that don't know, it was a video game before that, a very good one. It's one of the
Wow.
best games as far as storytelling goes ever made, right? Um, and so here's the issue. It's a great story, and it's a story told through cutscenes, and a cutscene is like, okay, I'm not going to let you control anything. I'm just going to show you, and then I'm going to let you control after this. And then like dialogue while you are controlling things. But when you're going through a video game and you kill thousands of enemies, and maybe thousands of these enemies are people, right? Maybe it's a war militia or something like that. It's hard to connect a person that kills thousands of people with the same story and the same level of importance, because there's that disconnect from the narrative and what you're doing, because there's that jankiness of video games, right? The solution to that, and this is what I'll use in the future, the solution to that is artificial intelligence, because artificial intelligence is a framework that's been used for video games to make them feel more real, like the AI of the enemies, how they move, how they interact. And The Last of Us 2 was the game, one of the first games when it did come out, where if you shot an enemy and they like fell over and died, you'd hear the rest of the band of people start screaming like, Jonathan. And then they'd start freaking out and stuff, because each one of these people had a name and they were connected to the rest of them. So they were losing a person, right? Here's where it gets really fucking insane, because now with AI, you can train it and build a personality around one person and build a personality, and it reacts in real time to what's going on. Because for the AI, it's the Matrix, remember? So
Right.
when you train this AI to protect its friends, and then you kill its friends, you did just kill its friends in the only world it's aware of. And so that's why I said storytelling in that medium has always been janky, because there's never been that aspect of realism in it, like film can have, right?
Yeah.
But that's going to change with AI, because you're going to give an AI like a whole page of who this person is, and it's going to come up with the rest, and it's going to embody that person. Even when you communicate with them, you could say anything you want and they'll talk back to you. And I've already seen demos of this. It's insane.
Well, Spielberg did that with Ready Player One.
Yeah, the book Ready Player One is good as well. Like it's like you guys know about Neuromancer? It's another book, but it's basically like the book that I haven't read it myself, but it's like the book that kind of like kicked off like, hey, you know, the term metaverse comes from that, from William Gibson, I believe. But it's like, before that, there really wasn't there was like science fiction concepts, but there really wasn't like a concept of like the Matrix, right? And so this book is the book that the Wachowskis read, that kind of inspired them to make the Matrix, because it was like, holy shit, I could see a world that exists in the future where humanity no longer wants to live in the real world anymore. That's kind of what the book plays on. But then they took that and went, well, what if AI becomes the runaway, like it may, and then needs us still? So we're not going to eliminate us, but it needs us somehow, but it needs to entertain us. I love that one spot where Agent Smith says that and this is why that movie fucks with you forever, right? Where Mr. Smith is talking to, not Neo, I forget, it was someone else in the movie, but he says the reason that the simulation isn't optimistic and idealistic is because human beings
are needed to
connect to the uncanny valley. Well, yeah, no, they can't. They'll connect with that. It's too nice. They'll start to question their own reality if it's not painful.
Wow.
And this exists in the animal kingdom as well. So it's like one of those interesting thoughts, because some people will say we're in the Matrix right now, right? Or something similar to it. Because as we start prompting AI, it's like, well, what if we're just sitting in a machine that someone's prompting right now? And when there's jank, it's just the machine not getting it, right? It's like, oh, I didn't translate that correctly. And I was saying this on the podcast with those guys yesterday, but it's like, we're in a point now where you have to learn how to communicate with AI, but eventually it will learn how to communicate with you, and specifically you. And then that's going to be in the place where my grandma's using it, you know, and that's the kind of the turnover point. But
the thing that I love about the topic of imagination goes into reality is I really truly wanted to touch on as many subjects, because sometimes people just, put it in that one world of movies or theme parks or video games. And I wanted to share a quick story with you guys that I think is really hilarious. Is, me, I'm an ex-auto mechanic. So I just love this world. And one of my very best friends, a guy named David Beckley, we were the ones that built that Drake car, moved to California to race this pro stock car. And it's just like the whole thing we always heard in drag racing, that, going a quarter of a mile, which is 3 city blocks, right? A 3 city block from zero, that there was scientists and mathematicians that said there is no way that you could propel a mass versus speed. There's no way that you could move a mass of 1,200 pounds from a dead stop to over 200 miles an hour. It's just not possible. It's not possible. Well, Kenny Bernstein broke the 200-mile-an-hour record. And then John Force broke the 300-mile-an-hour record. And his daughter just broke a world record of going a quarter of a mile. And it was 3 seconds. And it was 334 miles an hour. So how that happened is the mathematicians and the scientists couldn't think on how could you create a motor to propel that much weight that fast. Well, the horsepower went from 3,000 to 9,000 to 13,000. And now, right now, they're making cars that they can put 2,500 and 3,000 horsepower in a car. And they just get better because they keep having imagination. And it's like, well, what if instead of running the blower off the belt, why don't we just, connect it to the strongest part of the motor, the crank? So why won't we do the boost? So now all they're doing is making more explosive fuel, methanol, mixed with nitroglycerin. And let's compress that with fuel and air into the chamber. And so they're not only running superchargers, but they keep picking up the boost, but they also use turbochargers. So now exhaust pipes used to come out the rear. Now the exhaust pipes are coming out the front. And so me and David were talking about, and once you build these motors, the first thing they do is they plug a laptop in it. They start the motor from a laptop and they dial in the horsepower while the motor is running live time. So they know exactly where the horsepower versus torque is. And they're just dialing in the air fuel mixture because everything that's in the motor now can be run by a laptop. And they just, okay, we got 2,100. Let's do this. 2,300. Let's do this. 2,100. Let's go backwards. 2,300. Let's just make a little twist. 2,353. And David was going, man, he said, you wouldn't even recognize the automotive world. So another thing that this one group kid has like millions and millions of followers on YouTube, another great imagination is. And so this kid loves building these kind of motors, but he puts it in an old Dodge van. So there used to be this concept, right? That the word sleeper, right? So you pull up to this car that's got $4,000 just in the paint job. And you pull up with it with a Dodge minivan that the doors are different colors than the quarter panels, the fenders. There's like a spider web in the windshield of the car, you know what I mean, from a rock hitting it. And this guy pulls up and you look at the seats in the car and go, what are going on? And this little minivan ended up running 9 4.25 miles at 148 miles an hour. So very few cars could touch it that are street legal, right? Mm-hmm. And so this kid just came out with something that's better than that. And right now he's getting hated on in the whole motor world because he's got money from his YouTube channel. So he bought a brand new Model S Plaid, took the body off of it, and put that Dodge van on it.
Oh.
So here's why everyone's mad at him, okay? Because he finally connected with that group that doesn't like electric cars. And so he's with his buddy, and he goes, not only can this car do the 1/4 mile in 9 seconds at 152 miles an hour in a 1/4 mile, but he goes, I'm going to say something right now that the motor industry that are using motors like that will never, ever get. And I know how to get you. And once I tell you this, you can't go back. I've built 9-second cars. And I'm always worried about how long I can keep them running before they give me the light. And I run to the end of the 1/4 mile, hopefully beating the other guy, and have to totally rebuild the whole motor because it melted down. It's not street legal. If I build too much horsepower, I destroy the clutch. If I get the clutch to work well, I destroy the transmission. If I get the motor, the clutch, and transmission to work, it rips out the rear end differential of the car. Now I got to make that stronger. But I also got to get all the traction to the ground. And he says, so anyone that has a 9-second car, it's not street legal. You get maybe 1 or 2 passes out of it before you break something and have to rebuild it. He goes, I've run 20 9-second runs with this Tesla. Never broke down once. Never overheats. Doesn't burn the tires. So I don't have to buy new tires. He goes, all the things you hate about drag racings are gone if you go to electric. How much money does it cost to maintain your car? And you know that 50% of the runs that you run, you lost because something broke. He goes, I'll take this Dodge minivan and I'll kick your ass not only the first time, but every time you pull your car up to the track. And he goes, that's the difference between gas cars and electric cars. And he goes, when people start to realize that I'm sort of pissed off at this car because he pulled up and he's got air conditioning on and he's playing his stereo.
What do you think of hydrogen cars, Dad?
Really, truly unproven. It's one of those things like
because I've been seeing shit about them again. So I was like curious what you thought of hydrogen cars.
I'm up on it. It's like here's what people always say. If you don't see a way for something to fuel itself, it's not there yet. So people
like
are
the
looking
fuel
at,
stations.
Yeah, the ability to pull up to something other than the people that are trying to create it and actually fill it with hydrogen.
My friend had a hydrogen car and he had a hard time with that. They had a hard time going to the fuel station to get it filled because sometimes it would work and sometimes it wouldn't. And
that is one of the great things about electricity is you have it at your house.
Yeah,
so
you have it
odds
everywhere,
are you don't have
whereas,
hydrogen.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
I'm curious how because I think
again imagination.
We went through this whole process of
we run on water.
And if you can get it to that point, which it's not there yet, or you could just take a drop of water, put it in a gas tank, and boom, you're off. How sustainable is it?
I think we'll get to nuclear before we'll do that.
Probably.
I believe with AI, without a shadow of a doubt, we'll come up with free energy for all. Yeah, it's really becoming a crazy place in the world because all the people that I have in Europe, the saddest thing about what's happening to Europe right now is not only inflation and economy, but the government's trying to, it sounds awful, but what they're trying to do is slowly kill the masses because they're overcharging them for energy. That's real happening right now. So I have dear friends that I've known for almost 5 years that the cost of their energy has gone up 21 times in the last 5 years. And no one's talking about it. No one's talking about it. So can you imagine your electric bill going up 22 times more than it is right now? It would devastate everyone in America.
Yeah.
And that's what Europe's doing to certain countries.
That's crazy.
Elon Musk brought it up. He goes, he said, there's no way. He said, in the worst way that you could actually create energy, which is fossil fuels, you know what I mean? Burning stuff to create steam. I'm an automotive engineer. Do you guys know what nuclear plants do? They use nuclear reaction to boil water. And that steam turns turbines to create electricity. They're using nuclear energy to create steam.
Well, I what's so interesting about nuclear power too is I still haven't seen the show Chernobyl. I can't wait to watch it on HBO because I've heard it's just amazing. But there's been like the 3 Mile Island zone and Chernobyl and certain Fukushima as far as lately goes, where people are like, I don't want to have anything to do with this nuclear power aspect, even though, if you counted the amount of times we've had oil spills, or you've counted the amount of times we've had stuff go wrong with that, it's probably more. But I think
fission versus fusion, which is another whole thing.
Continuous polluting the air. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's like, come on, there's got to be better ways. But yeah, we brought up a couple of things.
That takes imagination, right? You not only have to have imagination, but
Yes.
The thing is you're, I love this idea, although this is the way that it is, but I love the thought that if you have the right idea and you're passionate about it, that you can get enough people to believe in it enough to actually make it happen.
Yes.
And because of that, there's many ideas that have been stifled through the decades. Like, it's not like electric cars are a new concept. It's not like I love this concept too, you guys. It's like all the inventions that have ever been made, all the tools were already here.
Yeah.
Like all the ingredients, I mean, right? The
Mhm.
tools we hadn't invented yet, but the ingredients have not changed for us. The same ingredients that we use to make the computers we're on right now is here thousands of years ago. You know, it was still here.
Digging it out of ground, digging it out of the ground.
It just took a mind and an imagination to put the pieces together to make what we now have. And that's the way that we'll see things in the future too. It's like, I get it now in hindsight, how electricity works. But
Yeah.
before that, there's only a couple of people in the whole entire known world that knew how that worked.
You know
And
what?
Did you know this? Sorry to get off topic. You know, your father, when I was really, really young, probably, I don't know, 14, in there, 13, 14. I always wanted to get a job and I did paper routes, all kinds of stuff. And so I found out that the movie theater actually paid for people to work there. So your dad was the guy that was doing the popcorn, making the popcorn, the soda, everything, right? And I love learning stuff. So back in the day, a lot of people don't know this, but if you ever seen someone arc weld, you know,
Mhm.
so they got an arc weld and they're using, you know, electricity, and it makes the point so hot and bright that it melts the metal for both of it. And that's how they weld things together. So I'm going up and watching the guy that runs the projectors put a movie in, right? And it came in these big cases and he's putting one reeled up and he had these two projectors, right? And then he opens up the side window and he's got this little measuring device. We called it a go, no go. And he puts it between these two metal rods and he slides it in there and he gets it right there. And then he tightens it up. And I go, what's that? And he goes, he says, that's the gap that causes the arc. And the arc so bright that it does the movie projector on the screen. That's how we can project it that far. And then he says, the motor knows how much it's burning. So what it does is it just keeps pushing the two pieces of metal together. And these two rods can make it through one part of the film. And then he showed me where to look on the film when it had a dot and then another dot. And then
Mhm.
the next time you see a dot, you turned on the other projector.
Right,
And
I remember that. Yes.
it would pick up the film exactly where the other one is. And then he'd put that in a box. And I'm going like, and so when with the first movies, if you've seen them back in the, I guess you would call this the 70s, you know, I don't know when they switched over, but they used to use an arc for the brightness instead of a light
well,
bulb.
it's
There wasn't a light bulb that was bright enough.
Yeah, it's interesting because yesterday when we went and saw Dune Part 2, we saw it in 70 millimeter, right? Which is something I've always wanted to do. Like, I'd love to see like 2001: A Space Odyssey or one of these films in
Oh,
70
wow.
millimeter, right? It's mostly always in like London, so I have to go to London to figure it out. But anyway, we were watching it, right? And it's on this big IMAX 70 millimeter screen. It's like the biggest thing I've ever seen, right? As far as a movie theater screen, like their heads were like the size of the whole room. And as we're watching it, you're watching small little pieces appear and disappear on the screen. And Hannah leans over to me and she goes, "The hell's wrong with the fucking movie?" And I'm like, "They didn't clean off the print before they put it in there. They didn't blow it off. That's leftover shit from them not cleaning the print before they loaded it in the camera." And
Wow.
whenever it was quiet, you could hear that fucking projector running back there. And what I always loved about classic, like seeing a movie in 35 millimeter or 70 especially, is kind of the thing that Quentin Tarantino loves so much about film, right? And why he won't shoot things in digital is that what you're watching when you're watching a film run through that camera, like you said, Dad, is the illusion of movement.
Mhm.
Yes. Yes.
Right? You're seeing all these pictures
35 what is it?
projected in
35 frames per
24
second?
frames, right? And you're watching these things rotate, and you're believing that things are moving, but it just took 24 pictures a second, and it's playing that to you enough for you to have the illusion of movement. Now, what's so interesting about that is you can tell it's so great, because when we were watching this yesterday in 70 millimeter, you can easily tell that you're watching film and not watching digital, because you've been so trained on watching digital for so long. I don't remember the last time I've seen a movie projected in film, because even back when the original Avatar came out, there was this large push to move all of the projectors in every theater to digital projectors.
Most theaters now are that way.
Are all even if it's shot in film, it's still rendered then digitally and then projected digitally. And they're not loading anything into the cameras, and for that, it's a hard drive, click, button, click. That's it.
I have a friend who used to work at a theater, and she was in that transition period where they had the canisters, and she had to wind everything up, set it up for the next show.
Like VHS, you remember? Yeah. Be Kind Rewind. You had to rewind the VHS tape.
Exactly. And then they transitioned into digital, and it's like, yeah, okay, plug it in, boom, that's it. And you've got theaters that are playing the same movie 20 times when all they could do in a day or even an afternoon, where all they could do back then was they bought 3 copies of the film, and they at max, or even if it was just one theater, they could only play it 5, 6, 7, 5 times a day, depending on how long the movie was.
Yeah.
And if it was a double feature, oh, wait a minute, we got to wait until much later in the day to watch
yeah, we even got into the theater, and it was 3:00, right, which was when it started. And because I'm like such a Dune fan, I'm like, I'll be there the first time it's on, right? And so it's 3:00, and we get all of our popcorn and stuff and sit down. It's like 3:05, because we all know there's 30 minutes of previews before this movie goes on. And we sit down in there, and there's no previews. It's just silent. Everybody's in there, right? Then the movie just comes on in IMAX. No previews, no nothing.
Well, it's hard to put previews in.
I was going to say, the IMAX cuts of those movies, Oppenheimer didn't have it either, but it's like those IMAX cuts of those movies, if you guys have looked them up, they're like miles long. They're like these huge cylinders that you have to like load into there. So when it was quiet, sometimes you'd hear that camera running back there and running through, and you could always tell, because not only the screen being as big as it is, but just the way film looks, you can tell when something's being projected frame by frame. At least I can, like it's noticeable to my eye. But
when you see,
it's magical. It adds a layer to the experience, I'd say.
What I think is still funny today is that we will watch a movie or something, and it's like, how in the hell did we watch TV at that resolution?
Oh yeah.
So
I remember when I got my first HD TV. Yeah, I think I was the first one in the family to have an HD TV. I like saved up my money and bought one.
So you're watching TV, and you're watching at the resolution that it is. And they go, well, listen, let me show you this old commercial. And you're going, it's all blurry. How in the hell could I see something if it was all blurry?
Right. Yeah. And now you got AI models that can upscale all these things to 4K or 8K now. So it's like all those blurry things. I was seeing this today, how there's like so many people that are stepping up and going, oh my God, we redo this. Instead of redoing the whole TV show, let's just remaster it now with AI and re-release it. Because now with AI, you can update the effects, you can update so many things about it, and still keep, I guess, the skeleton of what you've made there. Video games do this often. They'll just remake, like there'll be a game that came out on Nintendo 64 back in the 90s, and they'll remake it for the latest consoles with new graphics. It's like the same game, but they'll remake it. And I think that they'll do that, with TV and movies and AI.
Star Wars,
of course.
did that. I mean,
people weren't happy about that one though.
No, they weren't. But that shows you the technology and how they could go, okay, let's see, how can we make the original better? Oh, yeah, let's make it explode in a more spectacular way.
Let's just say that Han definitely shot first. And we all know that because that's a defining character trait in his storyline. George.
Yeah. Well, one thing, if you guys don't mind me shifting gears again,
sure,
about imagination into reality. I don't want to spend long on this subject, and then we can go to something more positive. The subject just for a short period of time, and then we'll get off of it. Is I just want all of us to sort of discuss of how we sort of see imagination, work for the evil side. All right. So, I know that I can bring up something right away where we can talk about, the you guys probably know the saying exactly, but in media and propaganda and stuff, it's like if you say a lie with enough passion over and over and over and over and over and over again, you can actually change the imagination of people. And so, we're sort of seeing, and it's sad to see history repeat itself where there's a whole group of people on the planet that believes a certain race needs to be taken off the planet. They need to be extinct. And so a lot of people sit around because of a lack of imagination. And they basically say, that ain't going anywhere. That ain't going to happen because they don't know what happened in the world wars that we had, with the concept of Hitler being able to captivate the imagination of a bunch of people. And I recently heard this, and I just thought when I say it, it's sad. It's super, super sad. But I just want people to realize that when you worry and you start pondering all the awful things that could happen to you, and sometimes minds do this, basically, the joke is that, I feel something weird in my body. So then I'm going to go on Google. And, so you just realize that you're still alive, but you had a brain aneurysm. And that's why, so
yeah, too much WebMD.
So this imagination can get really, really out of control. But I watched these two guys on a podcast, and when this person said this, I could see that it shook the other podcaster. And he said, so, and the worst thing that you can think about is Auschwitz, you know what I mean? That there were people during that experience with the imagination doing the most god-awful things that you can possibly imagine. But yet there were people in that experience that were having the time of their life.
There's not to bring this right back to films, but there's actually a film that's nominated called The Zone of Interest by The Zone of Interest is what it's called, by Jonathan Glazer. This is one of the films that's nominated for Best Picture, and he's nominated for Best Director. This film takes place around a family that's, the head of the family is a Nazi, right? And at least I think so. I'm not 100% on that one, actually. But this whole film takes place at their house with their family, and it takes place in two separate ways. One, what you're visually seeing and what you're actually hearing, because this house is close to Auschwitz. Ooh. And it takes place in that time. So even when they're like, there's this one scene that I saw the other day, I haven't seen it yet, where the kids are swimming and like playing in the backyard, playing in the pool, right? And it's this beautiful shot of the house in the background, and then you got the foreground with the pool, kids jumping in the pool. It's like a wide shot, and then right above the house edge, you just see this smoke of a train going by. And because we're aware of what the trains were doing, of course, we have context of what that train actually meant, and the duality of seeing these kids play in this pool and have fun, knowing what's going on right on the other side of the house.
Yeah.
It's insane. But that film I've heard is amazing, because the whole audio track to the film has a whole nother second story that it's telling that you're not visually seeing.
Man, I did not mind you bringing up the film, because
I'm excited to see it.
You can talk about AI and the positives of imagination, but then you got the people that did watch the Terminator films. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and they're saying, "Look out, here comes Skynet."
So you got these people that have hung around people not listening and trusting to their own imagination. And so when you don't trust yourself or feel like you're not enough or not worthy, and you're open to listening to other people's imagination, they can get you to think some really stupid stuff, and so to think that everyone for a while was thinking that, certain school shootings didn't really happen, that there was a bunch of, actors that were going in, and they basically were putting this all as a fake show to charge their propaganda. And it's amazing that a bunch of people that lost their children during that time decided to go into a class action lawsuit and make sure that this guy lost every bit of money that he had. And so, so it was his imagination, and he was just saying that he's an opinionist, right? It wasn't fact. I'm just being, what is the word you help me with?
It's
Matt?
like this whole
Persona?
Alex Jones thing, right? Reminds me of exactly the same shit with L. Ron Hubbard, because it's like, okay, so this dude grew writing science fiction novels and eventually made a religion that's basically science fiction. Yeah, I don't think that's reality, guys. And it's similar.
But don't tell that to them.
Well, I can. It's for
you
them to
can.
believe it.
That's what I think. That's what the point is that Robert's bringing up.
Yeah,
right. Exactly.
Why can't I live in a volcano?
Yeah,
and hit the high level? I mean, come on, man.
It's like a video game. Yeah,
but
just hope you do your playthrough well enough so then you can go to the right place. You get the best ending. So
it's the concept of what is good and what is not good, but for what may be not good for one is good for the other.
Well, that's the crazy thing about subjectivity, right?
Yeah.
So
bingo, Matt. Subjectivity.
I thought I would tap into this with both of you just for a short minute, because I just think it's fascinating where, a lot of people that I know for a fact in the world are very, very lost and learned hopelessness and don't believe that they have a snowball chance in hell, which is a pretty funny statement, so so if you can control a group of people. I actually heard this one time, and it was a book on how to create how to get out of a cult. And so guess what is the number one fear of every living thing? Fire. There is nothing more devastating than fire. Burns plants, burns everything, kills animals, kills humans, burns, everything down,
Even the smoke gets you.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people die because of smoke inhalation before the fire burns them up. So if I'm going to scare a group of people into submission, make sure that you tie 10%. It's like, you don't listen to what I tell you.
Fire,
you're going to
brimstone.
You're going to go to this burning place, and they're going to push you out. And you're going to be knee deep in burning coals, and you're going to have this guy that can handle fire hand you a pitchfork, and it's like, start shoveling. I don't know where you shovel it, but it is pretty amazing to me that that like science fiction, there's organized religion that can come up with the most crazy imagination and the disciplines that are going to happen if you don't follow the rules. And it's like, some people think I'm being sacrilegious here, but I'm just like going, that's why certain group of people that have a tendency of believing that they have some kind of common sense, that when they hear certain organized religions going, hey, this was going to happen, they're like, they check out, man. It's like these imaginational stories that, people are telling and really actually believing that maybe the story might be something that's like a parable that's trying to tell you something and teach you something, that instead of that, it's literal, and that, don't make sure you don't look at another woman with lustful eyes because you need to poke your eye out. It's like,
well, it's literal in certain situations and not in others, and that's what makes us human, is that we'll basically take the things that we want and the things that we don't want. I think where it gets disturbing and bad for both you and others, and this is my personal opinion, is when it gets to that it gets to that point where you're living a life of fear based off of these rules, and then you're pushing that fear onto your children or other people based off of those rules. what's so interesting about, you could pick any religion, right? But like I always found it very interesting, the thoughts that people have about hell and the thoughts that people believe about hell. Because, you know, I haven't read the
Came
Bible in a
out of
very long
somebody's
time.
imagination, didn't it, Matt?
It did. Like,
How do we know that it didn't start from somebody's imagination?
but this is
As
the
a
thing, though.
reality of this is how we can at least explain whatever it is
Yeah.
that's going on.
But a lot of the torture and stuff that people think is part of hell comes from Dante's Inferno.
Mhm.
So, but they're either they haven't read the Bible itself, so they don't know that stuff's not in there, because they've heard maybe from a pastor that it's eternal hellfire and everything like that. If you, and I just looked this up to confirm it again for myself because it's been a while, but it says that God casts Satan down to a pit of fire or a lake of fire, right? It does not in anywhere in the Bible say that you're going to a hell of fire, or that's where you're going to be, or you're going to be tortured through the 7 deadly sins of based off of what you did. No, that's Dante's Inferno. That is not in the Bible. That is something another imagination wrote about what they perceived those things would be.
And somebody came up with the idea based on what you're sharing, Matt, is that, okay, if God cast Satan down into the fires of hell or the pit, if somebody did something bad enough that they were to be cast down because God did not favor them, then they're going to experience that. And then look what happens. It builds upon itself. And now you've got Dante's Inferno. Oh my God, Dante explained it perfectly. Are going to hell with fire and brimstone.
Right.
And so there we have this now.
Yeah, and the amount of
sort
paintings
eternal
that have
image.
happened after the fact based off Dante's Inferno. Like there's so many paintings, or it's funny how being in the United States, right? How still to this day you can walk into a church and see Jesus portrayed as a white person. And still to this day that like blows my mind, because we all know that's not true.
Well, how do we, yeah, exactly. How do we even know that? Because if he's from the Middle East and he's a true Sabra of Israel, then he's
definitely
tan.
not blonde, blue-eyed, and white. Can we agree on that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the Sabra is like a tanned person. He is not, he has an olive skin. There we go. An olive skin person. So what happens is now we as Americans, or maybe most of the white people in the world, have interpreted it because they accepted it more than, let's say, those.
Oh, we lost Craig now.
Who are of a different color and skin. And it's we've all interpreted that differently. Who's to say that Jesus is not a black person, who, or maybe an Asian, in the sense of like what we would consider an Arab person or an Afghan person.
Well, what's so interesting about it,
imagination is imagination. He didn't even have a father.
Yeah, how do we know that? This is the story.
Well, I like talking about certain things like this. One of the things that has always been fascinating to me about the whole, like, how Jesus is portrayed in American society is, I remember the moment when I was doing research on this stuff myself, and I realized when there was this kind of mafia style family that ended up being in power in Italy and eventually being Pope, the Borgias, right?
Right.
And that out of the Borgias, there was Cesare Borgia, his son, that if you look up pictures, looks a lot like the pictures of Jesus that you're worshiping. And there's a reason for that. There's a reason that it looks a lot like Cesare. And that's because it was based and to some belief off of that look of Cesare Borgia. And you're like, wouldn't that make it blasphemy then? Because you're worshiping somebody who's a false prophet, a false god, not the true God.
Yes.
You're worshiping a picture of Cesare Borgia, and that's in a majority of churches in the United States. That's already against the rules of the book that they're talking about.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's like in plain sight. And that's one of those imagination things.
It's actually the second commandment. The second
Yeah, no,
commandment
you're right.
is
Yeah.
don't worship any idol gods. Don't
Thou shalt have no other gods before me.
But
yeah,
it's interesting what an imagination can do, because
Right.
to a lot of people, if they close their eyes and thought of the pilgrimage of Jesus, or they thought of any of these things, or the 12 disciples, they obviously see the version of them that was portrayed when they were children and when they were
Yes.
growing up. Because it's like, you know, for me, I can't read a Harry Potter book without the characters being the movie characters, because I grew up with
Right.
the movies, right? So of course it's going to be that for me. But I think that's the same with religion, right? A lot of people will see things or perceive things based off of someone else's imagination of what they told them those stories were.
Say it again. Say it again.
Yeah, based off of the imagination of what people believe those stories were. So like whether it's the story of Moses or whether it's the different stories, like I remember when there's this one filmmaker, Darren Aronofsky, great filmmaker, made like The Fighter and Black Swan, a bunch of others. He made a film called Noah. And in this film, Noah, that's based off of the biblical tale, he wanted to make it as close to the biblical tale as possible. So there's actually these iron angels that show up and defend the ark in the final moments of the movie.
Wow.
And I'm like, a lot of people had problems with this because they were angels, not rock angels. And he's like, no, read the Bible. It says they're rock angels.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
it's interesting because no one would perceive it that way. Like it's just
where
what
do we
someone
come up
told
with
you.
Where do we come up with the St. James version of the Bible versus what the original Bible is? And it's like, okay, wait a minute. And even then, how do we know that the Bible is not just a story of various stories that people thought, oh, these are very good and are parable like enough that they teach lessons? Well, then people take it beyond that. They base their whole lifestyle on this story. Now, if you want to go back to another movie, Galaxy Quest. Okay,
You
the
guys keep
people
coming up with movies. I have never.
With Tim Allen.
I
yeah,
got a whole
but
note.
the people who are subjected to the problem in Galaxy Quest based their whole lifestyle on stories that they had seen supposedly from America, and they based their whole life on that. And there's so many science fiction stories that are built around it. How do we not know? And I'm just going to go straight out. How do we not know that the Bible is not this? It's just a book that somebody imagined, that wrote. Somebody thought, okay, these are great, parables to help teach humans how to do things, what to do, and things they should believe for the greater good of the masses.
Right.
And then
Well,
you come
yeah,
up now from there, you come up with the
talk-
Quran, at least in their version, or you come up with the beliefs of Hinduism and Buddhism, and they're all over the place, but they're based on a foundation of something.
Right. Well, we talked about this, and I believe in our first podcast, which was "What do you believe?"
Yes,
You know,
right.
for unlimited wisdom, and it is pretty interesting that we can talk about a character that everybody would love, but no one wants to talk about that character came out of somebody else's imagination. And we could
absolutely.
go to our kids. You know, I love Pink Panther. I don't know why I love Pink Panther, but you know, Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner,
Uh-huh.
and Popeye, and I'm sitting there thinking about, you know, these characters are real, and some people dislike them, people don't know about them, and then some people love them. You
Mhm.
know, enough to get a tattoo, you know, of Popeye on your shoulder or something, and it's like it. But I would say to everybody, instead of you, if you hear this, don't be offended by it. Just allow your imagination, because if we did in some kind of pulp culture, right? And we said, so we all know that Popeye becomes strong and can fight the bully, Brutus. And how does he do it? Spinach.
Mhm.
We all know it's spinach. And you would say that with so much freaking conviction, knowing that you just quoted some bullshit. So I don't know how money got moved around. I just know a history that there's power, and then there's money, and then there's fame, right? And I'm
Mhm.
like thinking, some guy sitting around with Walt Disney and says, "Hey, listen, I want to finance your next cartoon. Here's $1 million." And they go, "Wow, why would you do that?" And he goes, "Well, I do want one thing. Me and my family owns the largest spinach company in the United States."
Yeah.
And I just have this thought that if this guy was always trying to protect his girlfriend away from this bad bully and people that are trying to hurt her, that if he just had a can of spinach, that he could take them all out. And it's like, you're going to give me $1 million? Yeah. That's now part of my imagination.
Yeah. Like,
Robert, continuing on that thought, think about this. Where is Hallmark without Mother's Day and Father's Day? And then now Grandmother's Day and Grandfather's Day and Parents' Day.
People are all
Valentine's
upset.
Day,
People are
Second
all
Teacher
upset
Day.
How
that
did those
Easter-
come about?
Oh my God. Every puppy day, ice cream
Yeah.
day. It's like
Taco Day. Now we get,
Hey.
the cool thing is they gave us tacos once a week, not once a year. It's Taco
True.
Tuesday. So thank God. I love
for
tacos.
those of you that this has helped you sort of, and I hope in a funny way, to sort of stretch your imagination of where things come from. I just want to say one other platform is that please do me a personal favor and don't beat yourself up for believing in somebody else's imagination, because it's a part of a human being wanting all of us to be interconnected. When you really think about a human being and the stuff that they need to feel like they're part of something, our human needs, we don't like to be alone. We like to be connected. Some of us like to fight for a cause. Some of us like to fight against the cause. But if you really diagnose how much the powers of the world use imagination to keep you in fear, and also keep second guessing, instead of being mad at them, you're mad at somebody else. So when you think that a political group can be defined by a color, or whether they're an elephant or a donkey, or you see what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
it's like, you don't think the smartest people in the world are sitting around and going, we do have some animal lovers. They're really not into colors.
Yeah.
If we could do an elephant and a donkey, and so for some of you that can go back in history and go, how was this created? One thing we haven't talked about is the imagination of the advertiser. So now what you do is you sit down with people that are way smarter than the average bear. Where did we get that? Okay.
Right. Hey, boo boo.
But there's these things that are implanted in our psychology and our unconscious forever. And there's people that are sitting around saying, how can we get this? And they're so good at it that we're talking about movies, that these people used to slip this stuff in the movies called subliminal programming.
Mm-hmm.
And Coca-Cola and the refreshment stand had these little things that they get to show you. And it's like, geez, Craig, Matt, maybe we should grab some Coca-Cola and maybe some popcorn, and before we at least got to get a hot dog. It's like, they're smart enough to know, and they got caught. Google it. They got caught throwing things in those, how many frames per second, Matt?
24.
So 24, they're not going to notice one of the 24 in the second being someone drinking a Coke, someone eating some popcorn. And people don't want to believe that this stuff exists. If you don't think it exists, me and Mom watched
You and Terry. Your wife, right?
Yeah. What did I say?
Me and mom. I
Mom.
just want to clarify for everybody so they don't think it's your mother that you watched
Yeah,
it with.
it's
that
Matt's
it's my
mom. It's
mother.
Matt's mom. It's
Yeah.
everyone's mom. Thank you, Matt.
Yeah.
But Mad Men.
Mhm.
We finally watched Mad Men.
With John
And
Hamm.
yep.
Mhm.
And to honestly think that Don Draper throughout the whole entire thing is an imaginary character. You'll have to watch it to get that.
Well, just like Succession, right? It's
Yes.
this like imaginary family, but not so much. Not really.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And all of a sudden they always came to him because it was no longer an idea creation. He would always emotionally get them through a story. And so he was the guy with the magic. He was the guy that was like, it's about this. Which we would call a person today, we would call that person connected. That they actually can say, wow, what would get people to want to buy this? What needs do they really want? What would make them feel important or give them status? Or what would make them want to feel like I don't know, like they're being a patriot. You know what I mean? Versus, wanting to take the country down. And and we hear this in music, we hear this in advertising, we definitely hear about this in commercials. There, it's like, how a commercial actually can launch jog suits that sell out called Donut King. You know what I mean? It's is when you find someone that's got a great imagination, it becomes part of who we are. It's like if I say Geico Insurance, why do you think of a lizard?
Or caveman. They've got two icons that they got
Okay.
going against each other. Yeah. Or
And
plop plop fizz fizz.
yeah, we want to believe.
I still remember the Blockbuster guinea pig and stuff for some reason.
Okay. But see, there was somebody's imagination that you got a hold of.
So
They
the
got a hold
only
of you.
commercials from back in the day I remember.
Yeah, we all know what the real thing is. You know what I mean? It's in the back of your mind. It's something you're hoping to find. It's the real thing. And
Yeah.
that's a drink. That's not a concept or an idea.
We got it right here, and we call
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Da-da-da-da-da. I'm loving it.
Well,
wait a minute. We need to take a break. I got to go to McDonald's and get some fries.
Exactly.
Well, I think that there's like even this large amount of thing where like you're talking about someone else will hijack and give you their imagination to a certain extent. That of course exists for everything that we're talking about, both good and bad. And I think that that's why it's so important to always connect with yourself and go, is this a path that is right for me? And is this my imagination or is it someone else's? Is there somewhere I want to go with this that maybe they're not thinking about, because that is uniquely you? I like that about myself. So I think treasuring those aspects of who you are, right? Like trying to figure out what makes you so different than everybody else and not seeing it as a negative, but seeing it as like the biggest positive that you could be given.
Yes.
Right. Because, we can go through imagining all of these different things, and there's ways that things have been innovated on or things that have gone bad with imagination, all these different ideas. But at the end of it all is a person with an idea and an imagination. And I love this quote from one of my favorite graphic novels. It was turned into a movie too, but V for Vendetta by Alan Moore. And he has this saying in there because he's trying to overthrow like this very massive like UK government, at least at the time in this story, that's like 1984, like Big Brother, like kind of in everyone's lives and holding them back. And he wears this mask that you guys have all seen because it's like everywhere. It's the Guy Fawkes mask, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he has this saying, and it's in the graphic novel too. And he says, you can try your best to kill me, but I'm not a person. I'm an idea, and ideas are bulletproof. And that's the way that I believe. If you can truthfully have a great idea, you will have people come and share it, shout it from the rooftops. Like my dad said, you will have people come from the woodworks to go, that idea is amazing. Let's do
Yep.
something with that. And I
Absolutely.
think we need more of those people now more than
Yes, we
ever.
do.
Just if you, I love this concept that if you support someone else in their imagination, that then they'll in return support you in yours. Now we can lift
Yes.
everybody up instead of just, you know, just feeling like we're part of someone else's dream and vision instead of our own.
Mhm.
Well, Matt, we were talking about that today. You and I were.
Mhm.
when you're at a level of awareness, not saying that I or anybody, Matt, and you know,
I'm
you're
definitely not.
you're you know, you're you, right?
Right.
But when you really understand that virtually the entire time that you're using your conscious or unconscious mind, you're either enrolled in your imagination or somebody else's. And sometimes it's very difficult to realize when you're enrolled in somebody else's imagination. And what I think is really amazing about movies is if you ever see a superhero, we all have to imagine this power that they have. You
Yes.
know, that someone imagined their superpower. You know, we call that imaginator, where you actually create your own imagination. And isn't it funny that the villain also has an imagination? And through that imagination, they get to find out what the whole goal is to find out where the other person's weakness is. And it's like to instill your imaginations, it's like the chink in the armor. You know what I mean? And so
Mhm.
you have to really, really think about, you know, where did I get this? Why do I think this way? You know, why do I spend all my time believing that I'm not enough, that I'm not worthy, that I'm not good enough to be loved, that I don't deserve anything? It's like I don't have any way out. Have you ever stopped to actually ask yourself, is that what the world really wants you to be? Is uncreative with no imagination, just a follower, not creating and making anything for yourself or anybody? What a great place to have a consumer. What a great place to just have somebody that's not going to cause any problems. Let's just take that away from them. Let's give them the imagination that they want to be an employee for the rest of their lives. And they just have to follow the rules. And that just ends up just like it did for your parents and your grandparents. It's really going nowhere that you don't have a shot. And even though you don't have a shot, the world's going to end anyway. Oh my God, that's imagination too. So you guys got to understand that me, an individual, only had limited imagination. That I believed that by being a mechanic, I could have a family and support that family. And then I found out, wait a minute, everyone freaking lied to me. Everyone lied to me. There's no way I'm going to make the money to live the imagination that I had as a little kid. So now I got this big imagination, and then someone stuffs me in their imagination with reality, and I now got to make my imagination circle smaller to match my limited income. And then well, maybe I'll just rent, and maybe I'll just always have a used car, and maybe I'll never go on a vacation outside my state. I had to just keep shutting down my imagination because everyone told me that it's time for me to grow up and get into reality. And all that happened to me was me meeting an individual that went, Robert, everyone lied to you, and you know they lied to you. This is bullshit. And he expanded my imagination. And when he did, I went, oh my God, this is possible. This is really freaking possible. You're going to teach me wisdom that if I share that unlimited wisdom with others and get them imagine in a different state, that I actually could have imagination instilled in others where they believe in their self and they make their dreams turn into reality. And that's just a different community. That's a different movement. And it is against the grain. It is crazy. when a majority of everyone that I still know in my family that's still living or any friends, they're still doing the same shit as when I left them 37 years ago. They're still stuck in that imaginary matrix of this is the way things are, that they spend 90% of their time, if not 100% of their time, complaining about shit out of their control. It's the government's fault. It's just, the local government's fault. It's all these restrictions. It's like, oh my God, these taxes. I'm getting taxed. I'm getting taxed. I'm getting taxed. It's these constant things that all these complainers talk about to still their imagination. I'm telling you, we're here to give your imagination back. You know it's there. You know it's still there. And I would rather die being known as the biggest imaginator that ever existed on this planet, instead of being the person that just didn't imagine anymore. Because imagination for me makes me feel alive. Me and Matt were talking about this. It's like you think everything's awful, and it's like, oh, it's no one gives a shit. Well, guess what? When you are imaginator and you're imagining for yourself, you do create your little world of imagination. And everyone looks at you like a misfit toy. But misfit toys change the world. And the most important world you need to change is your own, for you and your family. Be the hero, the superhero, the imaginator in your family, and change your family's tree.
Oh, very true. Very true. He's writing down the time so he can put it up. But no, that's so true. You can be the change, honestly, in both your life and other people's lives. Like if you know my dad's story, I definitely would not be here if he hadn't done exactly what you just shared. If you couldn't imagine something different, right? And when you say even like going back to those places and stuff like that, you can see and feel to a certain extent the generational trauma that's there and the things that are kind of like passed on from generation to generation. That sucks. It sucks that that's the situation.
Right.
I wish it was better, but I think a lot of people are exactly where you said, Dad, where it's like you're constantly in this place where you're almost sometimes told that your imagination is a waste of time, that like you're even young sometimes, depending on how you were raised or where you were raised, they'd be like, hey, stop daydreaming, stop imagining so much, start living. Right. And that's true to a certain extent, except if you eliminate that part of your imagination, then you're eliminating part of who you are. Right. And like when you see somebody that truthfully has that childlike sense of creativity and wonder about them, or they're just excited about things, they figured out either how to get that part back or they never lost it. They were raised in a situation with people that acknowledged that and said, go for it. Right. Said, listen, this is what makes you unique. That part of you that was, 8 years old or 10 years old that wanted to do all those things, still exists in you. I had this line that I wrote where this character was upset because his life wasn't going the way that he wanted it to go. And he had this conversation with this older man. And he said, oh, that moment in time is happening to you now. And he said, what do you mean? And he said, that moment where that version that you imagined you'd be as a kid, you're not. You're coming to the realization that imaginary person that you thought you were, you're not. And you're coming to terms with that. You're coming to terms with that. You're not all that you cracked up that you thought you were. Like that's the case.
Yeah.
And the character comes to this realization that it's that lost thing. And in that story, at least, he inspires that guy in the same way that he inspires himself. But it comes from that place. It's like, no, that thing isn't really lost necessarily. It's more that you forget that it exists. And we're so ingrained to forget that it exists, except when we come across someone that didn't. And when this has happened, when that, like what Steve Jobs had, that reality distortion field starts to happen.
Right.
Their imagination and their dream is so strong that they get you to believe in the impossible, that there's things that can happen.
Exactly.
that
Yeah.
couldn't. And I just watched Oppenheimer not too long ago, and exactly the same thing with Oppenheimer. Here was
Yeah.
a guy that had the weight of the entire world, no joke, on his shoulders, how the
Crazy.
world would go.
Great movie.
And
Yes.
in that situation, he had to inspire and lead a whole group of people in something that he didn't know was going to work out. You had to have quite the fucking imagination. Even Einstein was like, this probably won't work out. So,
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, it's quite.
And whether
Well,
it's
I was going to say it's a matter of taking. Okay, I'm going to go with Master Yoda since we've kind of always been going to the movie references in this podcast. You know, it's the do or do not. There is no try. Yes, you can think about it, but do you have? That's the one thing about being a human that is so incredible is we have choice, and I know it says that in the God Memorandum too. We have choice. We can say whether we want to or not. Do we have the imagination to do it? Is there something there that sparks us to become a creator, to become an imaginator, to manifest what it is that we want? And a lot of times because of culture, because of the way we've been raised, because people have had maybe not they don't open up their mind well enough, they get suppressed. But for the weed that goes through and cracks the cement and sticks itself out from the cement, did that weed even think about knowing whether or not it's a weed and it should stay below the cement? No, it pushed through. It had imagination. It wanted to see the sun. And that's the beauty of what the human species can do because we can see that. Now, yes, depending on our culture, depending on how we're raised, we may end up not seeing what others may see. But for those that do, for those that can imaginate and get to that reality, what an incredible feeling.
Yeah. And I learned this. I learned this by hanging out with two incredible imaginators. You know, and when you hang around people that have imagination and they're constantly coming up with their imagination, they're sharing it with the world, and the rest of the world goes, I don't, you sound like a nut job, man. I don't even know how this is possible. And it's like they just figure it out while they're wrapped in imagination. And one of the stories that I recently heard, I wanted to share a movie with you guys because I don't know how much you know about it because I know nothing about it. But these guys were talking about, again, Matt and I talked about this. You're either in someone's imagination or your own. But if you allow yourself to be inspired through imagination of somebody else that's creating, then you get inspired to go, wow, maybe I should imaginate. And so this guy was talking about the story, the really rich story of Pinocchio. And they go from this original form to the newest one that just came out. We all know what the dream of Pinocchio was.
Mhm.
I just want to be a real boy. But me not understanding the story at all, I guess while he turns into this, that he goes down some pretty dark roads of some stupid imagination that don't turn out too good for him. So some people want to imaginate being a reality star, on reality TV. Maybe some people are imagining being a influencer on some kind of social media. And it's like, end up killing themselves because they're trying to do a TikTok video. You know what I mean? It's like, be very, very careful that you're not copying the wrong cat. Be very, very, aware that are you trying to imagine yourself having a lifestyle that somebody else does and you're just doing what they're doing and it's not you, it's not your imagination, because a lot of people try to get fame, fortune, money, and power, and all these things that people want. I want all kinds of, people to want me, and I want endless chicks or endless guys. And it's like all these things that the world tells us that is going to be part of our imagination. are you selling your soul in the pursuit of someone else's imagination? What is yours? What is your imagination? I want to be this TikTok person. I want to be, this social media person. It's like, I don't know, maybe that's because I've done that. I just wanted to bring up that Matt helped me create a brand where I'm going to be this internet. I mean, similar to Tony Robbins, if you don't know what he is, but that's not my path. So there's a number of times that I've looked at someone's life and imagined myself being that person when I'm not that person. Why am I trying to recreate what somebody else has created in their own imagination? Why not? Why can't I believe and trust in myself and figure out what my gifts are, what I uniquely have? See, a lot of people don't want to step into that because they believe that we cover this in our inner circles, and I know we'll cover this in our groups and Imaginator, is that what people do is they do what other people do when that's not their dream. That's not their part of the imagination. So it'd be like a superhero trying to use a power of another superhero when they don't have that superpower. That does not turn out well. So you get
Normally
these
not.
people that are going, I'm working my ass off. I'm doing everything. I'm doing exactly what that person's saying to do. I don't even know why they're teaching. So that's why Matt and I stopped that. I realized immediately that I was teaching people things that were going to show them skills that had absolutely nothing to do with their imagination. Now, I'm going to do my best to plug you into your own personal imagination, and you won't have to worry about how. You won't have to worry about why. So
I feel like that's a good place to end it on.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for that, Dad. That's very true. So
thank you.
truer words couldn't have been said about it.
Yep.
Not in my imagination.
I was just listening to you. I don't have anything to say. So
Yeah, no, I'm done. That is the reality of the moment.
Very, very cool.
Thank you so much for that. Thanks for that download. Right?
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, whoever, Unga.
I'll say one thing about that, right? I love this idea, right? Because as you're starting to think about like what you believe or don't believe in, I heard this one term that changed it for me because I tended to lean more into atheist instead of agnostic, or at least like spiritual, I would say.
Yeah.
Is this one person, I watched this one person communicating to this person that was just saying awful shit about how they would burn in hell and all these things like that. And his response to them is, the only reason you're upset at me is because your God's too small. Your God's smaller than mine. And that's why you're upset. Your God is all about you and all about humanity. My God is about the universe. It's about everything that's ever lived. It's about consciousness.
Interconnectedness.
Mm-hmm.
Connecting with every human being, not just the ones that believe in him or it or whatever.
Or what
right?
you believe.
And so when I heard that, it really changed my perspective, because before that, I always believed that something creating me or a creator or things around this stuff had to tie into that religious aspect of like, oh, I'm looking over your life and I'm making sure everything's falling where it's supposed to be. And that was always hard for me because, same thing like George Carlin would say. It's like, why do kids get cancer then? You know what I mean? To teach their parents a lesson. So I always had a struggle with those types of things. But when I heard that person say that, it changed my life, because then I saw it as, wow, I can actually believe in something that's even bigger than they believe in.
Yes. Yes.
And then I start doing more spiritual stuff and feeling more connected to what that is. And it's not judging me. It's all love and creativity and passion and care for other human beings. And that's what what
That's
I
your
get from it.
source.
See, we said that we were
I think
done,
it's my
Matt.
soul or my higher consciousness,
Right.
right?
Yeah,
I don't even
exactly.
call it a God. I like to just call it myself and everyone, right? Like
Right.
it's just where we go when we're no longer here is whatever that is. And I'm not going to call it heaven, but it could be a group of all of us. It could be our consciousness.
Yeah.
It could be whatever's next for us. This could just be a lesson,
Mhm.
right?
Matt,
So
as you're saying this, the download that I got is it's if you right now are struggling in your life, struggling, wrestling with your reality, it's because you bought into other people's description and imagination of what they perceive the world to be. It doesn't feel right because it shouldn't feel right because you're listening to somebody else's imagination of what that is. That's why you can go to AI and put in how many different names there are for God. And by the time you get done reading it, it's pretty much infinity because every religion, Christianity, Muslims, Allah, it's not only that they have different names, Jews, they not only have different names for God, but they have different names for God based on what he's doing at that time. So now you look at all the religions, there's thousands or infinity names. And then all of a sudden you run into these crazy people that change the world that actually make up their own word for whatever that is. That was a big release for me. That was a huge release for me. And I kept saying this stuff in my mind all the time. I'm always saying, Unga, Unga, you know, and I even have told Matt and Craig and other people close to me what I believe that is. So then I took the time to go on AI and actually say that word to AI, say that word to Google. It's not a word. It's not a word. So how did I make this up? In my imagination. So it's like Quan and Jerry Maguire. It's like Mana for Dwayne Johnson, The Rock. To think that these people struggled so much trying to understand someone else's imagination and their interpretation and description of certain words. That's why you feel lost. You fricking feel lost because someone's interpretation of what this is versus another person's. And you go, well, it sounds a little bit, but nah, I don't believe in that. And so in my seeking of whatever you want to call this unga, right? What is unlimited wisdom? When you really, really think about it, it's got to be your own.
yeah, I think of unlimited
That's it.
wisdom more as like a catch-all word for what that is. It's like
Yes.
it's just a
Mhm.
new version of the word of what you're pulling from, whether it's your own unlimited wisdom, whether it's a higher power's unlimited wisdom. I think that's kind of like what I love about that is that it is in a sense like of course unlimited then because and I love that war of art aspect that I've shared where it's like instead
Yeah.
of seeing what you're creating as you see it as see yourself as a conduit for creation. So it's
For
like,
others.
okay, wherever that is coming through me onto the page.
Yeah.
It's not me putting that on the page. It might have my experiences in it, but that higher part is what's passing through me. And some people need that, you know? So
Yeah. And I just truly believe that it's in all things and everything. Some people call it because that is the difficulty is people again have different definition for words and so then we do our very best to describe the words that are most important to us like love. And so that's why the funniest commercials for me right now online is these people that are dating and they bring someone in their apartment or wherever, and the person says, I need something to drink. And the person says, help yourself. And they open up their fridge and they go, what the hell is this? And they go, oh, that's for Max. Max, your dog. Do you notice that the person with the imagination and the feeling of love won't even call the animal an animal? Now that's Max. Oh, you mean it's dog food? You don't put dog food in the fridge. And the next thing you see, the person's out in the street and they're sitting down. They're sitting down with the thing that they love, the creature, the creator that was they love, and they go, "You were right about them." You know what I mean? It's like the reason that people look for love and connection in things that are not human is because we consistently try to describe shit that doesn't make sense. So the word love and the word whatever that is, unga, it's like, we'll have the sacrilegious people going, you can't make up your own word. Well, the creator created me. That's why some people just call it a creator. It's like, because I don't want to use your word and descriptions on what limits my imagination. My unlimited wisdom is a connection that I'll continue to drive on to make it hardwired and just really, really allow me to impact and inspire people to believe in their own self, trust their self, and imagine their own reality.
I was going to say, Craig, take it away before I start talking. Or
Okay, well, I think
that's why I love these podcasts. I love these podcasts.
Me too.
Because I hope that each and every one of you, I love you, Matt. I love you, Craig. I love all the watchers that are watching this.
Thank you, everybody.
We as a community just need to raise our standards. That's it. We're more capable of anything and everything. And it's like you get to create your own reality, and that reality does not have to be like anybody else's.
Bingo. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's episode 5 of Unlimited Wisdom. And there's more to come too. You can follow Robert Hollis at roberthollis.com. Also, if you'd like to join our exclusive community, the Inner Circle, you can join us by going to roberthollis.com/join to register. There will be lots of great exclusive content, and you'll be able to participate in our special breakthrough sessions where we work with you to help you move to the next level. Please don't forget to like and share this video on YouTube and share it with others. It will help our community grow and reach those with ears to hear. Matt, thank you so much, our executive producer. And of course, Robert, wow. The GPS to success, our guide, our inspiration, our imaginator to help us bring us to our reality. Thank you so much also to you for joining us. We appreciate you. We love you. On behalf of Matt and Robert, I'm Craig A. Jackman. Please be good to yourselves. Be blessed. And until next time, bye-bye.
See you, everybody. Thanks again.
God bless. Thank you, Craig.